Are we back on? We are. Who will go out and bring the sheep in? I can't smile without you. Can't smile without you. If you only knew what I'm going through, I just can't smile without you. You are late. Yes, you are late. But come right on ahead.
Just one verse?
Just one verse, yeah. Yeah. I'll confess later. I'll confess later to you personally, okay? You know me too well. Yeah.
News travels.
Oh.
Especially when you know as many people as Janice knows.
Yeah, that's true. Well, welcome back. Thank you for coming back. Now, here's my theory in regard to this session. If you're going to practically apply some of the things we've learned yesterday and today, and you take them and you apply them to what for most people is the worst loss of their life, then you'll be able to help with lesser losses. It's kind of like if you were a financial planner or advisor. If you were going to help people to manage some of the financial stressors that we would experience in life, if you educate them about the principles and the practices of dealing with the worst kinds of financial adversity, then they can use those principles and practices and apply them to other lesser kinds of financial strains. And so it's with that idea and that background in mind, I want to talk about widowhood. I have a good friend of mine who lives in Southwest Missouri who was a kid. The whole time that his father was alive, he was a PK. When I first met him and he found out about the ministry, he said, you know, I've been a preacher's kid all of my life. And at this time, by the way, he's about 70 years old at this point in his life. He said, I've been a preacher's kid all my life. He said, I have never sat in one Bible class about widowhood. He said, I've never heard one sermon about widowhood in my life. It dawned on me after my wife passed away, I had never preached a single sermon about widowhood. I had never taught a Bible class about the subject of widowhood. And when you stop to think, if you have an old Cruden's Concordance, if you're a dinosaur like me, and you looked up the word widow, you'd find a lot of references to that marital status. But it was after my wife passed away and I began to struggle like I did that I began to reflect about a lot of my life and my ministry. And I thought how I had so unintentionally neglected the needs of the widowed, even though I knew them and I knew about their loss and their marital status. I mean, I was with them a lot of times prior to their loss, at their loss, and I officiated at the memorial service. But I was totally ignorant of what it was like every day and every night, learning to live with that loss, grappling with it, embracing it, and being able to rebuild a life. I had no idea what that was like. So I was very neglectful. This can be a pretty tough subject. Let me introduce you to Millie. No offense to the other widowed people I know. I refer to her as my favorite widow. She, Groesbeck Church of Christ, north side of Cincinnati. I was preaching in a gospel meeting. The preacher came up to me and said, Dean, I've got this 90-plus-year-old woman who wants to take you out to lunch. I had never been taken out to lunch by a 90-plus-year-old woman, and I wasn't about to tell her no. So I told Mark, I said, Mark, tell her whatever day is fine, and wherever she wants to go is fine. So Millie takes me to a Japanese restaurant, which I thought was weird, because I didn't know 90-plus-year-old women ate at Japanese restaurants, but that's where Millie took me. And then after we had some private time, after we got there and got settled, I turned to Millie and I said, Millie, tell me about your story. Tell me about your love and loss. And so she proceeded to tell me about this man that she had been married to for 63 years. 63 years. And she told me about their life together. She told me about what a great father she was to the children, what he was as a great father to the children. She talked about him getting cancer. She talked about her caregiving with him and being able to keep him at home. And then he died. And then she dropped a conversational bomb. She said, but that wasn't my first husband. I said, Millie, tell me about your first husband. She said, I was 19 years old and I was pregnant. We already had one child, about a year old, and I was pregnant with our second child. She said, my husband was in General Patton's army in the Battle of the Bulge, and he died there. I can quote you exactly what she said after that. Quote, I had him buried in France, a decision that to this day I regret. End of quote. Now I want you to stop and think about her life at age 19. Now we're talking about the mid-1940s. She is a teenage girl. She's already had a child for a year. Now she's pregnant with another child. Her husband dies in France. What in the world is she going to do? How in the world does that kid navigate that time in her life? 4 years later, she married the man that she was married to for 63 years. When I left her at the end of that gospel meeting, I reflected so much on her story, and I thought, you know what, that has unique value. So when I'd go other places, sometimes I would call her and I would say, Millie, I was at such and such a place. I told your story. I wanted her story to have inspirational value, and I wanted her to know that what she had lived through and how she had navigated her life and learned to survive, learned to cope, and then even rebuild a life on that, I wanted her to know that that had great value to other people. You can survive. You can learn to cope. You can even grow through the experience. You can rebuild your life, and you can have a great life. But it doesn't happen by accident. Hurt happens. Healing doesn't. Now let me explain what I mean by that. Healing is something that you have to choose and work on. Hurt is something that just happens. It just happens. In the course of life in a broken world, hurt is going to happen. If you're going to heal, you've got to choose to heal. And you've got to seek the assistance to help you with that. Sometimes what happens is people hurt deeply in their grief, and they don't seek healing, and so they are stuck. And I think that's interesting to me. Professional people that I read in books and articles, they talk about getting stuck in grief. Couldn't you use a more glamorous word? They use such a common word for that. I just think that's odd to me. But they talk about being stuck in grief. You can be stuck in grief your entire life. You've got to choose healing. Just like when my oldest daughter was 5 years old, we were in Barnesville, Ohio, and Sunday night, the church met at the park there in Barnesville, Ohio, and had a picnic. And while we were there, my oldest daughter, who was 5 years old at the time, she starts hollering at me and running toward me, and she's holding her arm like this. Now, about halfway on this arm, it was going down. And she'd had a compound fracture. It was an ugly, to this day, thinking about that really kind of turns my stomach. She hurt, and she needed healing. We needed to take her somewhere where she could get help. And that bone was reset, and she was casted and went to kindergarten that way with Hope Hawkins, her teacher, by the way. It was a time where we needed to seek help for our daughter. Whenever we're grieving and struggling with our grief, we need to seek healing. It's not going to just happen by the passing of time. Time heals all wounds is a lie. It's not true. How in the world do you get in this situation? Number one, you say, I do. Number two, you stick to it. And number three, you keep breathing. And that's how it happens. There are about 15 million widows and widowers in the United States of America right now. Who is ministering to them in their unique life that they didn't choose, that they were forced to deal with? Now, I'm going to challenge your thinking. I'm going to ask you to think out loud with me. Half a dozen. Let's go a half a dozen. Give me a half a dozen things that we commonly in our culture relate to widowhood. Somebody get us started. Loneliness. It's almost always the first thing that's mentioned. Do you know it's not like a normal loneliness? It's not like the loneliness I felt when I was a freshman at Freed Hardeman College, it was called in the time, in 1971. And I left my girlfriend up in Dover, Ohio, south of Canton, Ohio. And every Sunday night, I would go to a phone booth and call her collect. And by the way, those of you who are younger, you might have to Google the phone book thing. The phone booth thing. But it was a very lonely time being separated some 700 miles from somebody I'd become very closely attached to in my teenage years. It's not that kind of loneliness. You know the gal that you're very familiar with in regard to the morning show with NBC? No, not Katie Couric. Remember the halfback for the New York Giants that I watched in black and white, Frank Gifford? Kathy Gifford. Okay, they both were married previously. They were married for 29 years. He was significantly older than she was, I think about 10 years. And when he died, one of the things I really appreciate about Frank Gifford's wife is she was so open and transparent about what a struggle she was having. You can go to YouTube and you can see this interview with her where she was asked, why in the world did you move from the Big Apple to Franklin, Tennessee? Her answer, quote, I was dying of loneliness, end of quote. When she was interviewed by another news media about her journey after Frank died, she said she was painfully lonely. See, it's a different kind of loneliness. A sister, our sister in the Lord in Middle Tennessee, Anita Burchard, she said one day on Facebook, loneliness can be suffocating. It's a totally different kind of loneliness. But yes, I think it's the number one problem that the vast majority of widowed people experience after the death of their spouse. Maybe not everybody, but the vast majority of people, it's the number one problem. I used to think there was a cure for it. I'm not so naive anymore. I think it's more like you learn to manage your loneliness after you've lost your spouse. And you can do that by the grace of God, but it's not easy, and it takes a whole lot more than time. You've got to seek it. Give me another, that's only one, you've got 5 more to go. Something that we associate in our culture with widowhood.
You feel like a piece of you's missing and you're not sure who you're supposed to be anymore.
Okay, you feel an emptiness because that person was a part of your life. Now, remember what we pointed out yesterday, if you were at either one of the sessions. Your life is people relationships, and experiences. That's what your life is. People, relationships, and experiences. So when you have somebody that dies on you, a chunk of your life has been taken from you, has been cut out. You know, imagine I call it a two-story cake, two-layered cake. Okay, and it's real pretty and real nice and decorated, but then somebody cuts a slice out of it. A slice of your life has been taken away from you, and you have to learn to live with it. It's like, well, one lady, a widow lady who wrote about this, said that widowhood is like an amputation. And for some of us, there is no prosthesis. I thought that was interesting. So you've got this emptiness because a part of you has been taken away, and loneliness. Give me 4 more. Fear. What do you have to be fearful of? Everything. There's so much. You were a part of a team. And as a team, you could bounce things off one another, and you could figure stuff out about how you're going to do things and deal with the setbacks and the difficulties. Now you're not a team. Now there's just you. The we got flipped upside down. Now it's just me. So there's fear about the present, about the future. Okay, so that's 3. Give me 3 more. Financial. There can be financial jeopardy. If you think that the Social Security system is the perfect safety net for widowed people, it ain't true. It's not. Now, I appreciate the Social Security system. It is a good system that has great value, but it can also be, it can be your additional heartache. It can be so confusing, and it can be actually a burden and not a blessing. And I can't get into all the details. I went through a struggle in regard to mine. I had to go to the Social Security system office that was nearby, I think 3 times before it finally got straightened out. But it can be so problematic. There are widowed people, even who are our brothers and sisters in the Lord, but there are a lot of widowed people in our culture who can be in financial jeopardy because they've lost a spouse. A lot of times, you're going from 2 incomes to 1 income, and that means a huge change. So there can be financial jeopardy. Give me 2 more. Oh, the IRS. Let's lump that into the financial jeopardy thing. Yeah. Oh, the IRS, it can be so confusing.
Well, I get a deduction this year. Make sure I won't.
You get, okay. It is a struggle with government, IRS, Social Security. Yes, ma'am. Sadness. Yeah, you just have a foreboding sadness that you struggle with, and some days it's a lot worse than other days. It's kind of like in the cartoon where the cartoon character is going around and the cloud is hovering over them everywhere that they're going, and then sometimes it rains, and then sometimes it doesn't, and then sometimes it just pours cats and dogs. The sadness is a real struggle, because think about what you've lost. That's why you're sad. Yes, ma'am.
You lost your ally that helps you with everything.
You lost your ally, the person who helps you with everything. One of the things, I don't know if I'll have time tomorrow, but I sure hope I do. You know, when we think about the loss of your spouse, it's not just the loss of your spouse, and it's not just the loss of your marriage. Stop and think about what that marriage is. How much is involved in the blessing of marriage? I call it, no offense to you women, I call it the pregnant blessing. It's like a blessing with a whole bunch of other blessings inside. And it's more than quintuplets. I mean, it's just a huge blessing. Marriage has so many blessings in that package of marriage. And you've not only lost the person, but you've lost all of those blessings that go with the marriage. All of them, every single one of them. Well, I think you get the point. You know, there's a lot involved here that I never thought about. So my wife dies on Christmas morning of 2013. Midway through January, I'm sitting near Canton, Ohio, on a cold winter night, and I do something I do not typically do. Now, you know, all of us have idiosyncrasies. You know, we're all weird. It's just different degrees of weirdness for different reasons. Do I have an amen? Okay. Okay, now, so I'm sitting there, and the house is empty, and something just comes out of my lips. Orally, I say this out loud. What's wrong with me? I am not a talk to yourself person. Now, some of you look like you probably are, okay? I am not one of those. What in the world prompted me to have that experience? I was just a mess. Yeah, confusion. What is wrong with me? That's how much of a struggle sometimes we can have with this kind of an issue. It's just a very, very difficult issue to deal with. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to run through a whole bunch of things, and we're going to do this way too quickly, but at least maybe it will prompt some thought in you that might be helpful to you, if not now, maybe later, either for yourself or for somebody else. Now, when we typically think of the loss of a spouse, we think of grief. Can you imagine a person losing their spouse and feeling relief? How could that possibly be? Oh, okay, you're not watching. If you know that they're right with the Lord and you've been watching them suffer, you feel a sense of relief because they're not suffering anymore, okay? Can you think of another scenario? Okay, let's be honest about that. He says, you really didn't love your spouse? One thing that we need to remember is not every widowed person had a good marriage. Not every person who's widowed had a good marriage. All are not equal. Now, imagine being in a home where there was domestic violence, and the perpetrator of that domestic violence is the one who died. Would you feel relief? Would you feel grief? What if you felt grief and relief at the same time? How would that make you feel if you felt relief? Guilty. You feel guilty. That's how messed up you can be. You have these thoughts and feelings that seem inconsistent, but yet they're reality for you. And you can really struggle. Now, the whole tear, no tear thing, do you know there are people who can't cry? There actually are people who can't cry. And there are some people who just, well, they're far less likely to cry than other people. Yesterday at one of the sessions, I forget which one, I admitted the fact that I have this self-diagnosis. It's overexposure to the female gender. That's what I call it. Okay, I had 3 daughters and a wife, and I lived all those years in that setting, and you can't come out of that normal. No man comes out of that normal. So I'm a messed up male. I admit that fact, okay? I can predict something that's going to happen if the Lord permits. Next weekend, I'll be in Columbus, Ohio, and my 3 daughters are meeting me there, and we're going to go to the Ohio State-Rutgers game. Now, when I hear that all-brass band come out on the field, that sound of that all-brass band always promotes tears. It's an emotional thing. I love to hear that music from that all-brass band. Now, some people are not like that, but other people are. So let's say that you're tearing up in the presence of somebody else, or maybe you blow up emotionally in the presence of somebody else. What do we say if we're crying in front of somebody else? I'm sorry. What do we have to apologize for? I don't know. Nothing. You have nothing to apologize for. That is a natural human response. As a matter of fact, what's that really long verse in John chapter 11 say about Jesus? Jesus wept. Okay. If you read the book of Job, Job wept. If you read Psalm 56, for instance, hey, here's a really neat passage. I preached about this last Sunday in Blue Ridge, Georgia. Psalm 56, verse 8. In Psalm 56, verse 8, David says, you take my tears and put them in your bottle. He's talking to God. And he's finding comfort in the compassionate and omniscient God who knows that he's crying and is compassionately concerned. And in this poetic way, he says, you take my tears and you put them in your bottle. He also says in that same passage, you know my tossings or my wanderings. And he says, you put them in your book. Boy, that is a powerful passage about the omniscience of God and the compassion of God. It's okay to tear up. It's okay to cry. Some of the saltiest and biggest crocodile tears are cried in rooms just like this, trying to come back to church alone after for years coming with your husband or wife. And if you come back, where do you sit? Do you sit in the same place with the empty seat next to you? Do you go somewhere else in the room and sit? Or do you go to another congregation because you can't go back to the church family where you and your husband or wife worshiped? Those are real questions and real challenges that we experience that I never thought about until it happened to me. The heartache that you experience is unequaled because the relationship is very unique, very deep, and hopefully very strong, and you start having questions. You start asking questions you've never asked before, and some of those questions might have to do with your faith, with your Father in heaven, your church family. You're going to struggle. It's okay to have a faith struggle. It's nothing to be ashamed of. Just like we said in the previous session, I really appreciate people who respond to the invitation publicly and admit to their church family, I'm struggling with my faith. If we don't know somebody struggling with their faith, of what help are we going to be to them? What help are we going to try to make available to them if we don't even know that they're struggling and don't know the nature of their struggle? One of the reasons that there's value in faith struggle is in the course of dealing with the struggle, we can become stronger. It's just like the pain terrorists, those physical therapists who put us through the pain to get to a better place. Sometimes having a faith struggle can be a real blessing because it can challenge you to start searching, studying, and praying and praising more than you ever have before in your life. The loneliness we've talked about is a terribly difficult issue to deal with, and the identity crisis is caused by the fact that we have permitted ourselves to have our marital status define us. Now, I think that's a natural thing, but we need to be careful about that. I am a widower, but a widower is not who I am. Now, note the difference. I am a widower, but a widower is not who I am. I am a widower, that's my marital status, but my marital status is not my identity. I am a senior citizen, but a senior citizen is not who I am. A cancer patient could say, I'm a cancer patient or a cancer survivor, but that's not who I am. Do you know who you are? You are a creature, a human being who exists in the image of God and after his likeness. That's your identity. If you're a Christian, you are a child of God. You are a citizen in the kingdom of God. That is your identity. These other things that have to do with the here and now, they're all temporary. The reality is your identity, consistent identity, is your connection with God. Don't let the things in our temporary world become your identity. Because when you lose those things, or you lose those people, you're going to think you've lost your identity when you really haven't. But that's how severe it can be on you. You know, the financial jeopardy, we've referenced that. And what you're having to deal with is forced change and the fact that it's being forced on you. Loss is not a choice. It's something that's forced on us. And the absence of the person is what you're going to have to deal with. So where that person sat in your home, isn't it weird how we have these his seats, my seat thing, you know? I guess what are creatures of habit? That's what we are. We're creatures of habit. So when you're looking at the place where they sat, what do you see? You don't see them. You see air. And so your brain, your thinker, and your feeler is going to have to get used to embrace the absence of that person. And that's a very, very difficult thing to deal with in your life. We're not even done at this point. One of the things you're going to have to deal with and realize it's just a part of your journey is your dreams. Just recently, I had a dream about my late wife. It'll be 12 years this Christmas. It's not an uncommon thing and that doesn't mean there's something wrong with you, that your grief is not working right. It's just a part of the journey. Don't let it concern you. Most of the people I've heard that tell me about their dreams, they talk about it in a very positive way. They kind of look at it as like a visit and they wish it was even longer. So the dream experience is just a normal, natural thing that we have to be willing to embrace. The silence is because people make noise. Now, my suspicion is if you were married or you are married, you have heard these words. What in the world are you doing making all that noise? They're in a different place. Or the command, would you please be quiet? I'm on the phone now. Okay, a widowed person doesn't say that stuff. A widowed person doesn't have that problem. What you have to deal with is the silence. I have met widowed people who, when they get up in the morning, turn on the TV, and they turn off the TV when they go to bed. They do not watch TV all day long. It's the sound. It's their way of dealing with the silence. And the emptiness you feel is very natural and very normal because they help to fill up your life. They have filled up your life, but they're not there anymore, and now you have that emptiness. And to me, I describe what I experience not really so much as lonely, but empty. I describe how I feel as more empty than lonely, and just embracing that and accepting that is just a difficult thing to learn to do. And some days you do it better than other days. The stress level is off the chart because you've never been through this. And let's be angry now. Who do you want to be angry at? Name me, we can make a list here, okay? Don't mention specific names, by the way. Okay, who are the kinds of people we're going to be mad at? Doctors, okay. Why are we mad at doctors? Have they made mistakes? Is there, there's a thing called litigation. We live in a very litigious society, and there's malpractice insurance for a reason. Doctors make mistakes, and they don't know everything. Imagine that.
Ourselves.
You want to be mad at yourself. Why do you want to be mad at yourself?
That you missed some signs, that you didn't take action.
I missed this. I missed that. I could have been a better caregiver. Why wasn't I there? You caregive and you caregive and you caregive, and in exhaustion you have to turn away and you go and maybe you take a shower or you go and change, and the person dies on you when you're gone and you're not in their presence, and you can be angry at yourself. Whenever I got a call from Vanita, who was in Kansas, and she called me, first conversation, it was a long conversation, close to an hour. And I remember in the course of the conversation, what she basically told me was she killed her husband. Let me explain. It was during the COVID crisis, and she got COVID. She gave COVID to her husband. She survived, he died. So she killed him, right? See how you got to remember. Now you're thinking, you got to think logically here. See, that's how she was thinking. And so you can be angry at yourself. What if I hadn't gotten COVID? What if I would have stayed away from him? Now, she assumed that she was the one that gave him COVID. It could have been somebody else, but see, she jumped to that conclusion. And so she locked into those things, and she became angry with herself. How about let's be angry with the person who died? Jackie Hall Smith lives in Titusville, goes to church in Titusville, Florida, and she told me that sometimes when she would take a shower after he died, that she would pound the side wall of the shower and she'd say, "Why did you leave me? Why did you leave me?" She's mad at her husband for dying on her. Now, she wasn't going crazy. She is a little bit odd, though, isn't she? Steve, sitting back there, knows Jackie Hall Smith. Okay, she was venting. And it's not uncommon for a person to be mad at the person who's died. You know, what if the person who died, they died in an automobile accident because they were just so bound and determined to go get something at a certain time late at night? If they had not been so stubborn about going out to get that item at that time, that person wouldn't have died, is the way we think. Boy, this is so hard, isn't it? So anger is a very natural and normal experience, and the worry and the fears you have are because you're alone now. You're not a part of a team. The we got moved to me, and the restlessness, the tossing and the turning. Now, when this list was much shorter than this, it was the first time I ever tried to do a workshop like this. Chester, West Virginia. The woman who died, it was her husband. He comes to me. I'm thinking maybe 80 years old, wire rim glasses, about as thick as the bottom of the old glass Coke bottle. And he's starting to tear up. And he says, "Dean, I want to suggest that you add something to that list that you had." At that time, the list was about maybe 10 or 12 things. He said, "I really think you need to add something to that list." And he said, suicidal thoughts. We need to not be so naive about the effect of difficult life experiences on us, even when we're Christians. There are many, many more suicidal thoughts than there are suicides, and there are way too many suicides. Whenever we get together with our brothers and sisters and we're worshiping, let's remember there's a lot of hurt in that gathering, unbeknownst to maybe the rest of the church. And some of those are so serious that there's been suicidal thoughts. Why in the world is this so difficult? Well, there's an answer to that question. This is a unique relationship. It's the only human relationship described in the Bible as one flesh. The parent-child relationship is not described like this. The brother-sister relationship, even in the church, is not described like this. One flesh is the single description given solely to the marriage relationship. And when you have participated in marriage the way God wants, with the total giving of the total self for a total lifetime, and you lose that, it's going to have a powerful impact in your life. You stop and think about what marriage in the expectation of God is. You're emptying yourself to serve this other person. Marriage is a ministry and is a one-flesh relationship, and then one of the two of you dies. And you're left alone in a world of 8 billion plus people. And you have now become a misfit in a coupled world. It is a coupled world. Let me give you an example of how this is such a coupled world. I'll give you two. I was at the Freed-Hardeman University lectureship. I think this was a year ago, and I approached a vendor space where they were selling things. The FHU associates sell things to raise scholarship money for students, and so I approached the table. The lady who was staffing the table said, "Before you go home, make sure you get something for your wife to take home to your wife." Right then, I had to make a decision. do I address that subject or do I avoid that subject? Now, earlier on, I would avoid that subject and just go on. But now I've learned to use that subject to educate other people. And I proceeded to explain to her that in the years past, I always came to their table and I did buy something to take home to my wife, but my wife has died and I'm a widower. And I said it softly and carefully. I used the right kind of words, but that helped to communicate to her. Don't assume that everybody at a certain stage in their life is married, because that's not true. So I'm in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I'm doing a workshop there. And I finished up, and it just so happened that I had a friend of mine, a female friend of mine, who attended the same high school that I did in New Philadelphia, Ohio. She came with me because she used to work in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I knew she would enjoy that. So we're fixing to board the plane. Now, notice I've been in the South long enough to know some of their language. I'm fixing to board the plane. So we're checking in, and I have 2 bags, and one of them is maybe 1.5 pounds over 50 pounds. So I'm instructed to move some stuff out of one bag into another. So I open it up, and Amy is right next door to me. She's right to my right because she's already checked in. So I took something out, and I handed it to the guy at the ticket counter. And I said, hold on to this a minute while I open this other bag. And he said, here, I'll give it to your wife. See, the assumption was I was married. Don't assume that every male and female in a public space is married. For your benefit, so you're not embarrassed, and for their benefit too, because it can be awful awkward. But we do live in a coupled world. And we need to realize that people who are widowed, they're in a different situation. It's very socially awkward. Early on, especially, it's very awkward. I'll tell you, to this day, I've already said, it's close to 12 years now for me. There are certain times. Now today, we're going to be having lunch, Peter, afterwards. I'll have no problem being with all the people who stay for lunch here. But where I go to church when I'm not on the road, in Villa Rica, Georgia, I can't stay for the potlucks. I can't stay for the fellowships. I just have a really hard time with that. Because I just don't fit in. It can be very socially awkward in some specific situations to find a relaxed feeling in a public space. Now, what I've learned, I go to concerts, I go to ball games, I've done all that kind of stuff by myself, and I've learned if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it by myself. But it is a misfit in a coupled world. Socially, that is what a widowed person is. And don't ever say to a widowed person, I know how you feel, unless you want them to slap you, because they might do that, because that's really an insult. Because the reality is, nobody knows what somebody else is feeling, unless they tell you. People are different, couples are different, families are different. Some families are very talkative and very open. Some families are very dysfunctional. Some marriages have been for a long time. Some marriages have been for a very short time. There's a whole list of reasons, and this is an inadequate list, but there are a whole lot of reasons why it's different for different people. You don't know how another person is feeling. Now, you may be able to more easily relate to some people because of what you've experienced and what they are experiencing. But you don't know how they feel. We need to be careful about, that's one of the things, dumb things, caring people say. Remember I said that yesterday? You can Google that. Dumb things caring people say. Don't ever say to somebody who's hurting for whatever reason, I know how you feel, because you really don't. You really don't. Okay, Steve Franklin, come forth. Steve is from the Sunrise Church here on the south end. Sunset Church. I was just there. Was it last year? I think it was last year I was there. Okay, Steve is going to go around and make his rounds. Now, by the way, I need you to take a picture of Steve. He's so good looking that, now he's already remarried, okay? So he's not available. Okay, but I want you to take a picture of him. Get you a fork. Get you a fork out of there.
All right.
Now, you don't get one to keep because you remarried.
Right.
Okay, so he's going to be the distributor of the fork. Okay. Now, if you are widowed and you're in this room, Steve's going to give you one of these forks. I'll explain why. Okay, as he makes his way, raise your hand so he can get to everybody. If you are presently widowed, raise your hand and let him go around and pass out these forks. Now, I don't know what you're going to use the fork for. I'm going to tell you why I'm giving it to you. Now, if you want to use it to eat, go ahead. You could lose weight probably that way, okay? But that's not the reason I'm giving it to you, okay? Here's the reason I'm giving you this fork. You see the image on the screen where there's a street, there's a journey. Whenever you have lost your spouse, that puts you on a grief journey. Now, initially on that grief journey, all you can do is sit there and bewail the reality of what you're going through. It's like sitting in front of a slammed shut, locked door in your life. You know, we talk about doors of opportunity, doors that we walk through in life. Whenever you've lost your spouse, the door has been slammed, shut, and locked. And all you do initially, when that grief is dominating you, because you're human, you just can't believe that door's been shut. It is a harsh reality to deal with it. That is deeply grieving. You go ahead and you deeply grieve as long as you need to. Doug Manning wrote a book on the display table where you shouldn't be stealing books from. And the title of his book is Don't Take My Grief Away. So you sit there and you grieve as deeply as you need to, as long as you need to, because you earned that right with a great price. However, at some point in your grief journey down the road, you need to realize you've come to a fork in the road. Now, when you pick up a fork, what have you decided to do? Eat. And with that fork in your hand, what else are you deciding? Remember your mama telling you about the starving children in China. Why did she tell you that story? Clean your plate. Eat everything on your plate. You do not have to eat everything on your plate now. When you take a fork in your hand, you are deciding also not only that you're going to eat, you're going to decide what you eat. You're going to decide what you're not going to eat. You're going to decide how much you're going to eat. You're going to decide when you're going to quit eating. All of that with a fork in your hand. You're making decisions. Let the fork remind you of decisions. Now, here's my recommendation. Take this fork home, lay it somewhere where you will see it every day. Now, I've received pictures back from widows and widowers about where they've laid it. Could be on a nightstand, could be on a kitchen counter, could be on a little stand where you just enter your house, maybe from the garage, but a place where you see it every day. And when you look at that fork, don't think about eating. Think about, what am I going to do with my life? Because it's up to you at that point, and the Lord, what are you going to do with your life? You don't have a husband or wife to help you with that. Maybe you have a board of directors in your life that you've appointed that can help you with that. I couldn't go back to the church and seek the pulpit ministry because I had resigned from the pulpit those last few months to take care of my wife. If I would have tried to force myself back in the pulpit, I could have split that church. I needed to leave. All of my family is in the southeast part of the country. I'm not there for the weather. I don't like the weather. I'd rather live in Michigan than 40 miles west of Atlanta, and I'm a Buckeye saying that. If I were moving for the weather, but the reality is I needed to be down there. So here I was, a Yankee. I'm 61 years old, and I'm looking for a church in the southeast part of the country to take me in. I told the girls when they left to go back to their homes after their mother's memorial service Girls, I have 3 strikes against me. Number 1, I'm 61 years old. 61-year-old preachers are not flying off the shelves in the Brotherhood to get jobs. Number 2, I'm a widower. I don't have a wife. Churches are not likely and not often open to the idea of hiring a preacher who's not married. I said, I'm a Yankee looking for a job in the South. Strike 3. I finally found, after 18 months, I finally found a little church in West Tennessee, Murray City, Tennessee, population 650. They'd been a church of about 130. There was a fuss between the preacher and the elders. They had 3 elders. And because of that fuss, the preacher left and 2 of the 3 elders. And they went from a church of well over 100 to about 55. They were a broken church that needed healing. I was a broken preacher who needed a church. That little church, I can't help but think it was providential, helped me create the Widowhood ministry that I now have. The Widowhood Workshop Ministry, the grief ministry. They gave me extra time that a typical local preacher wouldn't have. They helped me launch a local widowhood ministry there in Murray City, Tennessee, and we had initially in the first meeting 12 widowed people. Then it went to over 20, then it went to over 30, then it went to over 40, and sometimes over 50 people monthly came in. We had a feast unlike anything they would ever have in their home at no expense to them. They connected with other people with whom they had a common bond of loss. They built their social network. We spent time and we encouraged them and gave them practical help for everyday living. And one thing that's really great to hear with the local churches, we've helped start those kinds of ministries, how people are growing in their faith, being restored to the Lord, being baptized into the body of Jesus, because they were introduced to the Lord and the church by a widowhood ministry. Helen Keller said, and don't we appreciate her life story? When one door of happiness closes, another opens, but often we look so long at the closed door, we do not see the one that has been opened for us. What are we going to do with our life? We've lost our spouse, we've not lost our life. There are 3 mottos of the Widowhood Workshop Ministry, and one of them is, don't die until you're dead. Sometimes when people have folks die in their life, they die too. They continue to exist, but for all intents and purposes, they died. They just continue to exist until they draw their last breath. That's not the way God wants us to live. We can live to the praise of His glory, a phrase, by the way, found 3 times in Ephesians chapter 1. That's what being a Christian is all about, living to the praise of His glory. Whether we're never married, we're divorced, we're married, or we're widowed, no matter what our marital status is. God bought us by the precious blood of His own Son for us to live to the praise of His glory. And that's what we need to choose to do. How are we going to do that, though? Real quickly, because our time is getting away. Lunchtime is too quickly. In regard to your marital status, you're released or free. Now, what's problematic is sometimes that is true, but you don't feel that way. Remember what I said, feelings don't care about facts. The fact is you're not married, but it can be a difficult thing getting your feeler to accept the fact, I am not married. You are free or released in regard to your marital responsibilities. Now that means, as someone not married, there are some advantages to not being married. All the cares and concerns that you had in regard to marriage, you no longer have those. So what are you going to do with all the time and effort you've poured into that relationship? Because you've been born and saved for the praise of His glory. Now, what are you going to do with your life? Now, for me, it was the creating of the Widowhood Workshop Ministry, this grief ministry. But we have got to realize that now We're more available than we've ever been. We're more flexible than we've ever been. And now we have experience, though we didn't want it, we have experience that can be very useful to the praise of His glory by helping other people. I would have never ended up in Murray City, Tennessee, which is in West Tennessee. It's about 80 miles northeast of Graceland, home of Elvis Presley. Okay? Now, my wife would have never agreed to move there with me. And here's the reason why. It was 30 minutes to the nearest Walmart in Jackson, Tennessee. I always thought that if I died first, I ought to be buried at the Walmart in North Canton, Ohio, because I knew she'd visit me at least twice a week if I was buried there. It would have been too country for her. She just wouldn't have been happy there. But I didn't have to ask her. I didn't have to honor her wish or her personal desire. Now you have a decision to do something with your life. Widowhood is a very difficult struggle. I can say that by experience and with the knowledge of many other people's life struggle. But it's not just a time of grief. It's a time of transition. It's also a time of adjustment and opportunity. And now you have an opportunity to take your life and mold something else from it. And we need the help of the Lord to do that. What is going to be your new normal after that happens? What's going to be your new beginning? You've got to decide that, and then you've got to decide how to get there. And both of those are very, very difficult. And here's the bottom line. Your future, well, it's going to be what you decide. Boy, is that a challenge. I have 40 minutes left, and I want to give you a 5-minute break, but I do want my 35 minutes because I want to share with you something I think of a very positive and helpful nature in the last session today before we eat lunch, and it's about hope. It is you're so susceptible when you're grieving deeply, you're so susceptible to hopelessness. We need to realize that there's a different perspective. So thank you for your time. I know that was a difficult session and for some maybe very challenging. By the way, I'm curious, how many of you did get a fork? I want to take a real quick count here. Hey, Steve, could you stand up and estimate a count too? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Wow, over 15. How many did you get? Right around 15. Okay, me too. Well, thank you very much for accepting my gift. And if you want to find a place to stick it, and then take, I need to be careful about how I say that. Okay. Because, there is that terminology in the English language, stick a fork in it, Okay, be careful what you stick that in. Okay, but here would be a cute thing. I've never asked any group of people to do this. But if you're so inclined to do that, on some of the information, you can even find my number and it's my personal cell phone number, on the internet, on the website. But there are some business cards here too. But if you want to take a picture of where you put it and send it to me, that would make an interesting Facebook post. So think about that if you'd like to do that. Now, if you don't want to do that, I understand. But feel free to do that. I've gotten some interesting pictures from folks. Let's take a break, please. Stand up, stretch.